Mr. Whitaker, if this yacht leaves the dock tonight, you will need me more than you know." The words were soft, almost swallowed by the jazz music drifting across the upper deck, but they struck the party like a glass dropped on marble. Grant Whitaker stood beneath the golden lights of the Harbor Grace, a 180-foot yacht polished so perfectly it seemed to belong more to a magazine cover than the Boston waterfront. He wore an ivory blazer over a crisp white shirt, a Swiss watch at his wrist, and the expression of a man who believed every problem had already been solved by someone beneath him. Around him, investors held champagne flutes. Cameras waited for the perfect photograph. The city skyline glittered behind the harbor, and beyond the breakwater, fireworks were scheduled to begin in exactly 42 minutes. Grant had planned it that way. The toast, the departure, the offshore signing, the lights over the water. Timing was everything. Miles Donovan had said that 3 times already, smiling with the easy confidence of a man who knew how to make pressure sound like opportunity. Then Emily Carter stepped into the circle. She was only the waitress. That was what most of them saw. A white woman of 28 with fair skin, brown hair tied back by a wine-red ribbon, a white blouse, a black apron, and quiet blue eyes that had spent the evening being overlooked. Guests had called her Miss, Sweetheart, and once, by the wrong name printed on another server's tag. She had corrected no one. She had poured sparkling water, carried shrimp plates, collected empty glasses, and listened, not because she was shy, because both spoke in details. A radio crackling too sharply, a deckhand breathing too fast, a faint hot metal smell near the aft service passage, a smear of dark oil on a young sailor's shoe when the deck should have been spotless. Grant turned toward her slowly. His hand still held the champagne glass he had been about to raise. "Excuse me?" he asked. The politeness in his voice was colder than anger. Emily felt the room, deciding what she was worth. Not much, by the silence. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. Someone near the bar gave a small laugh. Miles Donovan stepped closer to Grant's shoulder, still smiling. "A staffing issue, I assume. We should continue before the tide window becomes inconvenient." Emily did not look at Miles. She looked at Grant. "Sir, do not give the order to start the engines." The captain, standing near the bridge access, stiffened. The event manager's face went pale with irritation. "Emily," she hissed from behind the floral arrangement, "step back now." But Emily had already stepped too far into the truth to return to the shadows. 10 minutes earlier, in the service corridor, she had heard the junior deckhand whisper into a radio that there was a burning smell near the auxiliary mechanical room. She had heard the event manager cut him off. "Not tonight. We are not embarrassing Mr. Whitaker." She had taken one look at the young man's shoes and seen the oil. Not fresh from a spill. Tracked from below. Thin. Dark. Wrong. Then she had tried to tell security, only to be told that servers did not interrupt principals. Principals. The word had stayed with her. As if human beings became harder to warn once they became important. Grant lowered his glass an inch. "Do you understand where you are?" he asked. Emily's fingers tightened around the silver tray against her hip, but her voice remained calm. "Yes, Mr. Whitaker. I am on a yacht full of people protecting your image while ignoring the thing that may protect your life." The jazz music died on the last note. The harbor wind moved through her wine-red ribbon. For the first time all night, the man who owned everything in sight had no immediate answer. Grant Whitaker heard Emily's words, but the first thing he felt was not concern. It was embarrassment. 50 guests were watching him. 3 cameras were pointed at the upper deck. Miles Donovan stood beside him with a smile that suggested the entire interruption was already beneath serious men. And in the middle of it all stood a waitress with a silver tray, asking the owner of the Harbor Grace to stop his own departure. Grant set his champagne glass on the nearest table with careful precision. "Miss Carter," he said, reading her name tag at last. "This vessel has a captain, an engineering crew, and a full safety protocol. If there were a real issue, I would know." Emily looked toward the bridge access where the captain stood too still, then toward the event manager whose mouth had pressed into a thin white line. "That is what everyone keeps assuming," she said. Miles gave a soft laugh. "This is charming, but we are losing the tide window." He turned to the investors, spreading one hand, as if smoothing a wrinkle from the evening. The nerves of live events. Someone hears a sound, someone smells the kitchen, and suddenly the whole yacht is sinking at the dock. A few people laughed because rich rooms often waited for permission to laugh. Emily did not move. She reached into the side pocket of her apron and pulled out a folded white service towel. The event manager whispered her name again, sharper this time. Emily unfolded the towel under the deck lights. A dark smear marked one corner, glossy and uneven. This came from the aft service passage, she said. Not from the galley. Not from the bar. From the stairwell beside the auxiliary mechanical room. Grant's eyes went to the stain despite himself. Oil on a towel does not prove anything. No, Emily said. That is why I also asked the deckhand what he reported. A young crew member near the service door stiffened. He could not have been more than 22, with wind-reddened cheeks and the frightened posture of someone who had already been told he had spoken too much. Emily turned to him. Tyler, tell him what you said on the radio. The deckhand looked at the event manager first, then at Grant, then at the floor. I smelled something hot near the auxiliary room, sir. Like insulation or overheated wiring. I reported it twice. Grant's face hardened, but not at Emily now. Who received the report? No one answered quickly enough. That silence did more damage than an accusation. The captain stepped forward. I was not informed directly, Mr. Whitaker. The event manager lifted both hands, her smile strained. It was preliminary. We did not want to create unnecessary alarm before a major signing. Emily watched Grant absorb that phrase. Unnecessary alarm. She knew that phrase. It had cousins. Minor concern. Bad timing. Nothing urgent. Words that placed comfort above truth until truth became too expensive to ignore. Miles moved closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. Grant, do not let a temporary server and a nervous deckhand derail a contract we have spent 18 months building. Emily finally looked at him. His suit was perfect. His shoes were spotless. His confidence had no fingerprints on it. Why does the contract need to be signed offshore? She asked. Miles blinked once. Grant turned his head slightly. Emily continued, calm as the harbor around them. You said timing was everything. 3 times. You pushed departure even after the captain mentioned fog near the breakwater. You asked the event manager whether engineering reports could wait until after signatures. I was pouring water behind you when you said it. The deck went quiet again, but differently now. Not offended. Listening. Grant looked from Emily to Miles, and for the first time that night, suspicion had a place to stand. Captain, Grant said, delay departure. Miles's smile vanished for half a second. Emily saw it. So did Grant. The captain repeated the order into his radio, and the harbor grace remained still against the dock. It was a small decision in the language of machines, but on the upper deck it landed like thunder without sound. The investors looked at one another. The photographers lowered their cameras. Somewhere below, the engines that had been warming with a low, confident hum eased back into a waiting silence. Grant Whitaker stood with one hand on the table, his champagne untouched beside the folded towel. He had delayed billion-dollar meetings before. He had walked away from hostile negotiations without blinking. But he had never paused his own ceremony because a waitress heard what his system ignored. Engineering team to the auxiliary room, the captain said. Full check before departure. Miles Donovan exhaled through his nose. Grant, this is excessive. Grant did not look at him. Then the check will prove that quickly. Emily saw Miles's jaw tighten. Not enough for the guests to notice. Enough for someone who had spent the evening watching faces between refills. The event manager tried to gather control from the edges of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy refreshments inside while we handle a minor scheduling adjustment. Minor. Emily almost smiled at the word, but there was no humor in it. The same word had buried warnings in fishing docks, ferry offices, hotel kitchens, and boardrooms with ocean views. Minor meant someone important had not been inconvenienced yet. Tyler, the young deckhand, remained near the service door as if he expected to be blamed for the air changing. Emily stepped closer to him, not too close, just enough that he would not stand alone. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Tyler looked at her with surprise, as if no one had considered that possibility. Grant heard it. He wished he had said it first. Below deck, the engineering team moved through the narrow passage toward the auxiliary mechanical room. Their radio reports came in clipped and professional. Accessing aft service corridor. Checking panel temperature. Inspecting auxiliary intake. The deck waited. Waiting did not suit people who owned schedules. A woman in a silver dress complained that the fireworks would be missed. A A man from a venture fund muttered about optics. Miles leaned toward Grant again. You are allowing uncertainty to lead the room. Grant looked at him then. No, I am allowing information to enter it. Emily lowered her eyes for a moment, hiding the impact of that sentence. It was the first useful thing he had said all night. The radio crackled. Bridge, engineering. We have visible oil residue near the auxiliary access panel and heat discoloration around one connector. No active emergency, but departure is not recommended until inspection is complete. The captain closed his eyes briefly. The event manager went pale. Tyler's shoulders dropped, as if he had been holding up a weight heavier than his own body. Grant turned slowly toward Emily. His face no longer carried the clean confidence from the toast. Something rougher had entered it. Not fear. Accountability, trying to find its shape. How did you know the smell mattered? He asked. Emily folded the towel again, careful with the stained corner. Because boats do not usually announce trouble in a dramatic way, she said. They whisper first. Miles made a dismissive sound. This is poetry now. Emily looked at him fully. No, sir. It is maintenance. A few crew members glanced down, hiding the smallest signs of approval. Grant did not hide his. He looked toward the event manager. Who told Tyler not to escalate the report? The woman opened her mouth, but Miles answered first. Everyone was trying to preserve the evening. Grant's eyes sharpened. That was not your question to answer. The sentence cut through the warm air. Miles straightened, and for the first time, his polished confidence looked practiced instead of natural. Emily noticed his right hand slide toward his phone. Grant noticed Emily notice. Do you have something to add, Miss Carter? He asked. The respect in the name was new. Fragile, but real. Emily breathed in the salt air and listened again. To the silent engines. To the embarrassed guests. To the crew waiting to learn whether truth would be punished or protected. Then she nodded toward Miles's phone. I think Mr. Donovan already knows what the engineers were going to find. Grant Whitaker did not ask for Miles Donovan's phone. He did something more unsettling. He waited. The harbor wind moved across the upper deck, lifting the corners of the linen tablecloth, touching Emily Carter's wine-red ribbon, cooling the champagne that no one wanted anymore. Miles stood with his phone half hidden against his palm, his expression caught between insult and calculation. This is absurd, he said. A waitress now reads minds because a connector ran hot. Emily did not flinch at the word waitress. She had heard it used as a job, a dismissal, and a boundary. Tonight, it sounded smaller than the truth. Not minds, she said. Patterns. Grant turned slightly toward her. Explain. Emily placed the folded towel on the table beside the untouched glass. Mr. Donovan pushed for an offshore signing. He asked whether engineering reports could wait. He told you timing was everything before anyone mentioned the tide window. And when the report came back, he reached for his phone before you asked him anything. Miles laughed, but it was too quick. People check phones, Grant. We are not in court. No, Grant said. We are on my yacht. His voice stayed level, but something in it made the event manager step back. He looked toward his head of security, a calm woman named Rachel Sloan, who had been standing near the stairwell since the first interruption. Preserve the service corridor footage. All of it, starting 1 hour before boarding. Rachel nodded and spoke into her radio. Miles's face tightened. You are making a very public mistake. Grant looked at the guests behind him, the investors, the cameras, the people who had come to watch a contract become a spectacle. That would not be my first tonight, he said. The admission moved through the deck quietly. Emily saw Tyler look up. She saw the captain's shoulders loosen by a fraction. She saw the event manager stop pretending this could be smoothed over with another round of drinks. Then Rachel's radio crackled. Security office confirms footage from aft service corridor. Sending to main deck tablet now. A crew member brought a tablet to Grant. He did not take it alone. He placed it flat on the table where Emily, the captain, Rachel, and even Tyler could see. That small choice changed the shape of the room. The video showed the corridor outside the auxiliary mechanical area at 8:17. Tyler appeared first, kneeling briefly near the panel, then speaking into his radio. At 8:21, the event manager passed through, listened, shook her head, and pointed back toward the party. At 8:24, Miles Donovan's assistant entered the same corridor with a phone at his ear. He did not touch the panel. He did not damage anything. But he stopped beside the warning placard, looked toward the camera, and made a short call. Moments later, The event manager received a text and walked away from the report. The footage did not show a crime. It showed something almost more familiar. Pressure. Influence. A warning being made inconvenient until it disappeared. Emily watched Grant's face as he understood that distinction. Miles leaned forward. Nothing there proves I knew about a mechanical problem. Grant tapped the tablet once, replaying the moment his assistant appeared in the corridor. It proves your people were close to a concern you later dismissed as theater. Miles's smile returned, thinner now. This is business. Every major agreement has pressure. You know that better than anyone. Grant looked at the closed folder on the table, then at the still yacht, then at Emily's steady hands. I know pressure, he said. I forgot what it sounds like when it is placed on people who cannot afford to push back. Emily felt the sentence settle somewhere deep, near memories she usually kept behind locked doors. Her father had once come home from a private charter with the same look Tyler had worn tonight. Not hurt, not weak, just unheard. She had been 17, sitting at a small kitchen table in Portland, Maine, watching him turn a coffee mug between both hands while explaining that the loudest person on a boat was rarely the one who understood it best. Grant looked toward Tyler. You reported a smell and residue. You were told not to escalate. Tyler nodded. Yes, sir. Grant turned to the event manager. By whose instruction? Her face trembled with the effort of choosing between power and truth. Finally, she looked at Miles. His assistant said the signing could not be delayed. He said Mr. Donovan would reconsider the investment if the evening looked unstable. Miles closed his eyes for half a second. Emily heard the harbor, the soft ropes against the dock, the quiet intake of breath from 50 people realizing that the waitress had not interrupted the party. She had interrupted the cover story. Grant straightened, no longer performing authority, only using it. The departure remains canceled, he said. The signing is suspended. Everyone involved in burying a safety report will give a statement before anyone leaves this vessel. Miles stared at him. You need me, Grant. Grant's eyes moved to Emily, then to Tyler, then to the crew gathered by the stairs. No, he said quietly. I needed them. I was just too proud to notice. The words left Grant Whitaker's mouth and stayed there, heavier than any contract on the table. No one moved for a moment. Not Miles Donovan. Not the investors. Not the event manager who had spent the night arranging flowers, lighting, and silence with the same careful hands. Emily Carter stood beside the table, the folded towel near her fingertips, her wine-red ribbon shifting in the harbor wind. She had expected anger. She had expected dismissal. She had even expected punishment. She had not expected a man like Grant to admit pride in front of people who measured weakness like a stock price. The engineering radio crackled again. Bridge, auxiliary panel is secure for dockside power only. We recommend no departure until parts are inspected and replaced. No immediate danger while docked. The captain repeated the message, and relief moved through the deck like a slow exhale. No sirens. No panic. No dramatic rescue. Just one avoided mistake, which was often how safety looked when someone listened early enough. Miles looked at the investors, searching for support in familiar faces. This is exactly why we should have handled it privately, he said. You are creating doubt where there was only a maintenance issue. Emily looked at him then. Doubt did not create the oil. The quiet sentence landed cleanly. A few crew members lowered their eyes to hide their reaction. Grant almost did the same. Not from amusement, but from the realization that Emily's calm had more authority than all of Miles's polished certainty. Rachel Sloan, the head of security, stepped forward with the tablet. Mr. Whitaker, harbor safety officers can review the maintenance log in the morning. For tonight, I recommend documenting statements while memories are fresh. Grant nodded. Use the main salon. The event manager blinked. The main salon is set for the signing dinner. Grant looked at the crystal place settings through the glass doors, the untouched seafood tower, the name cards printed in silver. Then clear it. There was no anger in his voice. That made the order harder to resist. Staff began moving at once, not with fear this time, but with purpose. Plates were lifted. Contracts were gathered. Champagne was removed. The room designed to celebrate power slowly became a room prepared to hear truth. Emily stepped back to let others pass, but Grant noticed again. Miss Carter, he said, please do not leave. She turned. I still have service duties. The answer was automatic. shaped by years of being paid to disappear when important conversations began. Grant looked at the towel, then at Tyler, then at the crew watching from the edge of the deck. Tonight, this is the service. Emily held his gaze, searching for performance. She found discomfort instead. Discomfort was better. Discomfort meant something real was trying to grow. Inside the main salon, the gold chairs were pulled away from the long dining table. Crew members entered slowly, uncertain whether they were witnesses or problems. Tyler sat near the door until Emily took the chair beside him. Only then did his hands stop twisting together. Grant did not sit at the head of the table. He stood near the side, his ivory blazer bright against the dark windows, looking less like a host now and more like a man who had found a crack in the floor of his own house. Rachel began with simple questions. Who heard the first report? Who delayed it? Who gave instructions? The answers came slowly at first. The event manager admitted she had been told by Miles's assistant that any delay would damage the investment announcement. A steward remembered seeing the assistant near the crew stairwell. The captain admitted that guest experience had been allowed to outrank crew escalation during private events. Each statement was small. Together, they revealed the shape of a system designed to keep bad news away from expensive rooms. Emily listened without interrupting. Grant watched her do it. She leaned slightly toward each speaker. She did not rush them. She did not finish their sentences. She treated even nervous words as if they deserved room to stand upright. It made Grant think of every meeting he had ever dominated by speaking first. Then Rachel asked Emily why she had refused to step back after being dismissed twice. The room turned toward her. Emily's fingers touched the ribbon at the back of her hair. Because my father once stepped back, she said. Her voice remained steady, but the salon seemed to narrow around it. He was a marine mechanic in Maine. He warned a charter owner about a sound in the engine that did not match the gauges. The owner did not want to embarrass his guests. The captain waited. The report was softened. By morning, my father still had his life, but he lost the work that made him feel useful. She looked at Grant, not accusing him alone, but including him in a larger truth. That is what being ignored can cost. Sometimes it is not a headline. Sometimes it is a person going home quieter than they were before. Grant lowered his eyes. Outside the windows, the yacht remained safely at the dock, bright and still. For the first time that night, he understood that Emily had not been trying to stop a party. She had been trying to stop history from repeating itself in better lighting. Grant Whitaker did not speak for several seconds after Emily finished. The main salon held its silence carefully, as if even the crystal glasses on the sideboard understood that something more fragile than business had been placed on the table. Outside the windows, Boston Harbor moved in dark silver lines under the yacht lights. Inside, the people who had been hired to serve, steer, clean, cook, and disappear sat in the same room where investors were supposed to celebrate a signature. Grant looked at Tyler first. The young deckhand sat with his hands flat on his knees, still bracing for correction that never came. Then Grant looked at the captain, the stewards, the event manager, Rachel Sloan, and finally Emily Carter, whose blue eyes remained calm though her story had left pain in the air. I owe you all more than an apology, Grant said. His voice was low, but every person heard it. But I will begin with one. Miles Donovan gave a tired sigh from near the glass doors. He had been allowed to remain while statements were taken, watched closely by security, still dressed like the most important man in the room, though no one was looking at him that way anymore. Grant, this is emotional overcorrection, he said. You are letting a maintenance delay become a moral trial. Grant turned toward him slowly. No, Miles. I am letting a moral failure explain a maintenance delay. The answer was quiet. It was also final. Rachel's tablet chimed with another update. She read it, then looked up. The assistant's messages confirmed pressure was placed on event staff to avoid reporting any issue before the offshore signing. No evidence of physical tampering has been confirmed, but the concealment attempt is clear. Grant nodded once. That mattered. He did not need to make the story larger than it was. The truth was already large enough. A warning had been buried. A crew member had been dismissed. A waitress had been ignored because her uniform made her easy to underestimate. And a millionaire had almost mistaken a perfect evening for a safe one. The agreement with Donovan Capital is suspended immediately, Grant said. Miles's expression hardened. You will regret that. Grant looked at the crew seated around the table. I already regret enough for one night. No one smiled. It was not that kind of victory. The event manager began to cry quietly, not loudly, not theatrically, just the exhausted tears of someone who had built her career around keeping powerful people comfortable. Emily reached for a napkin and slid it across the table to her without a word. The small gesture made Grant look down. That was what dignity looked like when it did not need applause. Emily had every reason to humiliate the woman who had tried to silence her. Instead, she offered something useful. "Mr. Whitaker," the captain said, clearing his throat, "the yacht will remain docked overnight. Engineering recommends full inspection at first light." "Approved," Grant said. Then he paused. "And from now on, any crew safety concern reaches the bridge and my office directly. No event schedule outranks a warning." The captain nodded. Rachel wrote it down. Tyler looked at Emily as if the sentence had physically moved something off his chest. Grant saw that too. The meeting ended close to 2 in the morning. Guests had left in quiet clusters, their luxury cars sliding away from the marina without fireworks, without the offshore signing, without the photograph Grant had planned for the business pages. Emily stepped onto the aft deck to breathe. Her apron smelled faintly of coffee and salt air. Her feet ached. Her ribbon had loosened. Below, the harbor was calm, indifferent to status, contracts, and embarrassment. Grant joined her a minute later but kept a respectful distance. For once, he did not feel silence because it made him uncomfortable. Emily noticed. "You are learning," she said. He gave a small, tired laugh. Slowly, she looked toward the dark water. Slowly is acceptable if it is honest. Grant rested his hands on the rail. "Your father was right. Boats whisper first." Emily's face softened, but only slightly. "So do people." Behind them, inside the yacht, the crew began clearing the room that had finally heard them. The Harbor Grace remained tied to the dock, safe because one ignored waitress had refused to become silent. And Grant Whitaker, who had once believed power meant never being interrupted, stood beside her in the quiet and understood that sometimes interruption is the last kindness before consequence. By dawn, the Harbor Grace looked almost innocent. The gold lights had been dimmed. The champagne had been cleared away. The flowers on the tables leaned slightly from the night air, and the deck that had held investors, cameras, and polished promises now held only salt, silence, and the soft footsteps of people finishing work no guest would remember. Emily Carter was in the service corridor, rinsing coffee cups beside a stainless steel sink, when Tyler appeared at the doorway with his cap in both hands. He looked younger in the morning light, less like a crew member, more like a young man who had spent the whole night waiting for someone to tell him he was not wrong. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. Emily turned off the water. "You reported what you noticed. That mattered." Tyler looked down. "I almost took it back when they told me not to make trouble." Emily dried her hands on a towel. "Trouble is not the same as truth. People confuse them when truth arrives at a bad time." He nodded slowly, as if putting the sentence somewhere safe. On the upper deck, Grant Whitaker was already awake, still in the ivory blazer from the night before, though it was wrinkled now at the sleeves. He stood with the captain, Rachel Sloan, and 2 engineers while the morning inspection began below. No investors, no photographer, no Miles Donovan, only clipboards, radios, and the faint smell of coffee from the galley. Emily carried a fresh pot out of habit, then stopped herself near the doorway. For years, service had taught her to enter rooms quietly, pour, leave, and let important people continue uninterrupted. Grant saw her hesitation. "Miss Carter," he said, "would you join us?" The engineers glanced at her, not with irritation this time, but with room made in their eyes. Emily stepped onto the deck, coffee pot still in hand. "I was only bringing coffee." Grant looked at the pot, then at the empty chair beside the captain. "Then bring your observations with it." The sentence was not grand. That made it better. Emily set the coffee down and sat. The chair felt strange beneath her, not because it was expensive, but because no one had asked her to stand behind it. The lead engineer opened the maintenance log and began explaining the auxiliary issue in plain words. A worn seal. Heat stress near a connector. A small oil leak made worse by delayed inspection. Nothing explosive. Nothing theatrical. But enough that leaving the dock would have been reckless. Grant listened without interrupting. Twice his mouth opened, the old habit rising, and twice he closed it. Emily noticed. So did Rachel. So did the captain. Change, Emily thought. was sometimes just a man stopping himself before the damage repeated. When the engineer finished, Grant turned to Tyler, who had been standing near the rail. "Your report will be included first," he said. Tyler blinked. "Mine, sir?" "Yes. The first warning should be the first line in the review." Emily watched the young man's shoulders straighten. It was a small correction in the official record. It was also the difference between being blamed and being believed. Later that morning, Grant walked alone to the main salon, where the long table had been reset not for a signing, but for statements. Emily found him standing beside the closed contract folder. "You could still make another deal," she said from the doorway. He did not turn right away. "I probably will. With someone else? With different terms." He looked at her then. "And different ears." Emily studied him, measuring the honesty under the polished words. "Ears are not enough." Grant nodded. "I know. Listening has to cost something before it counts." Outside, harbor bells rang across the water. Emily felt the sound move through her like an answer from a life before this one, from a kitchen table in Maine, from her father's tired hands around a coffee mug. Grant picked up the unsigned contract and placed it in a drawer. Not destroyed, not forgotten, put away until truth had finished speaking. For the first time since she boarded the Harbor Grace, Emily did not feel like part of the background. She felt like a witness to a man beginning the difficult work of becoming worthy of the warnings he had survived. By mid-morning, the marina had filled with ordinary noise again. Dock carts rattled over wooden planks. A ferry horn sounded somewhere beyond the harbor wall. Crew members from neighboring boats carried bags of ice, fuel receipts, toolboxes, and paper cups of coffee, unaware that one yacht at the end of the pier had changed the meaning of a single night. Emily Carter stepped off the Harbor Grace with her apron folded neatly over one arm. Her feet ached from standing through the event and the investigation, and her wine-red ribbon had loosened enough for brown strands of hair to fall near her cheeks. She expected to sign out, collect her pay, and go back to the harbor restaurant where temporary workers were remembered only if they forgot something. Instead, Tyler was waiting near the gangway with 2 cups of coffee from the dockside stand. "This one is actually hot," he said, offering one to her. Emily accepted it with a tired smile. That is a rare luxury. Dana, the lead engineer, joined them a moment later with her tablet tucked under one arm. "Mr. Whitaker approved the inspection budget," she said. "Full replacement, not a patch. He also asked for crew escalation training before the next private event." Tyler looked surprised. "He said that?" Dana nodded toward the yacht. "He said the first warning should never have needed permission." Emily looked back at the Harbor Grace. Through the salon windows, she could see Grant standing with Rachel Sloane and the captain, no longer framed by champagne or investors, but by maintenance charts and safety logs. His ivory blazer still made him look like he belonged to another world, yet that world seemed less sealed now. The glass had a door in it. Grant saw her from inside and came down the gangway alone. No assistant stepped ahead of him. No security cleared a path. He stopped a respectful distance away, as if he had learned that space could be another form of listening. "Miss Carter," he said, "before you leave, I wanted to ask you something." Emily took a slow sip of coffee. "Ask, do not assign." A brief smile touched his face. "Fair." He glanced toward Dana and Tyler, then back to Emily. "I am creating an independent review of crew safety reporting across every vessel I own. Not a public relations committee. Not a document that gets filed away. A real process, with authority to pause departures and events when concerns are raised." Emily's expression stayed calm, but her fingers tightened around the paper cup. "Why are you telling me?" "Because I would like you to help design it." The harbor wind moved softly between them. Emily heard a rope knock against a dock post. She heard Tyler stop breathing for a second. She heard Dana shift her weight, interested but careful. "I am a waitress," Emily said. Grant did not rush to correct her. He let the word stand, then answered it with respect. "You are a waitress who listened better than my executives, my event staff, and my own instincts. You grew up around boats. You recognized a warning my system tried to bury. That is experience, whether or not anyone gave it a title." Emily looked at him for a long moment. She had met men who offered opportunities like favors, wrapped in gratitude that expected obedience. This felt different, but she had learned not to trust first impressions, especially from men who owned everything around them. "And if my recommendations embarrass you?" she asked. Grant looked back at the yacht. then at the crew still moving across its decks. Then they will be the ones I need most. Dana's mouth curved slightly. Tyler looked down at his coffee, hiding a smile. Emily did not smile yet. I will not be your symbol. No, Grant said. I am asking you to be a voice with authority. The difference mattered. It reached the part of her that remembered her father coming home from the charter, quieter than the man who had left that morning, carrying a truth no one had wanted until it was too late. Emily looked at the water, bright now under the late morning sun. I will consider it, she said. Grant nodded. That is all I can ask. Emily met his eyes. No, Mr. Whitaker. That is all you should ask. For once, he accepted the correction without flinching. As Emily walked down the dock with hot coffee in her hands and salt air in her lungs, she did not feel rescued from service work, and she did not feel purchased by gratitude. She felt something quieter and harder to name. A door had opened, not because someone powerful handed it to her, but because she had refused to let truth stand outside it alone. 3 weeks later, Emily Carter returned to the Harbor Grace just after sunrise, wearing a navy coat over her white blouse, black trousers, and the same wine-red ribbon tied neatly at the back of her brown hair. The yacht looked different in daylight, less untouchable, less like a floating stage for wealthy men, more like what it had always been beneath the flowers and champagne: steel, engines, wires, radios, workers, weather, and responsibility. At the main gangway, Tyler was waiting with a clipboard instead of a tray, standing a little straighter than before. Morning, Miss Carter, he said. Emily glanced at the printed badge clipped to her coat. Independent Safety Review Consultant. The words still felt unfamiliar. Not too large for her. Just late. Morning, Tyler, she said. What is first? He smiled. Crew listening session. Main salon. Mr. Whitaker said you should open it. Emily looked up toward the upper deck. Grant Whitaker stood near the rail in his ivory blazer, talking with Dana, Rachel, the captain, and 2 engineers. No cameras. No investors. No polished announcement. When he saw Emily, he did not wave like a man greeting a symbol. He simply nodded, like a man acknowledging the person who had earned the room before entering it. Inside the main salon, the long table was no longer dressed for a signing. It held notebooks, coffee, safety maps, maintenance logs, and empty chairs for crew members from every department. Cooks, stewards, deckhands, cleaners, engineers, radio operators. People who had once been expected to move quietly around power now sat facing it. Grant did not take the head chair. He sat halfway down the table with a pen in his hand and his phone turned face down. Emily noticed that too. Listening, she had learned, was made of small choices before it became a principle. She stood at the front of the room, feeling the old instinct to make herself smaller. Then she saw Tyler watching her, and Dana waiting with calm confidence, and Grant silent instead of eager to lead. Emily placed both hands on the back of a chair. I am not here to make this yacht look safer, she said. I am here to find out where it has been taught to ignore warnings. The room went still, not offended. Ready. At first, the crew spoke carefully. A steward mentioned that guest requests sometimes blocked access to safety corridors. A cook explained that galley alarms were often muted during private dinners because the sound bothered clients. A radio operator admitted that weather advisories were sometimes softened before reaching executives. Each statement revealed a small locked door. Emily opened them one by one, not with force, but with patience. Who told you that? When did it start? What would have helped you speak sooner? Grant wrote everything down. Once, he began to explain why a procedure existed, then stopped when Emily looked at him. You are right, he said quietly. This is for listening first. By noon, the whiteboard was covered with truths that had been living below deck for years. No one cheered. No one needed to. The relief in the room was quieter and stronger than applause. Later, Emily stepped onto the upper deck alone. The harbor was bright, and the water moved gently against the hull. Grant joined her, keeping the same respectful distance he had learned on the dock. My daughter asked about you, he said. Emily turned slightly. Lily, she said, anyone who can make me listen must be very powerful. Emily smiled, small and genuine. Smart girl. Grant looked at the water. She is. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Below, the crew continued the review without waiting for permission. That was the real change. Not the title on Emily's badge. Not the millionaire's apology. The change was in the voices moving freely through the yacht, no longer treated as background noise. Emily thought of her father in Maine, of his tired hands around a coffee mug, of the lesson he had given her before the world gave it a price. Boats whisper first. People do too. The Harbor Grace still carried Grant Whitaker's name, but now it carried something else through its halls. The courage of workers being heard, the humility of power corrected, and the quiet truth of a waitress who had been ignored until the night everyone needed her most.